Do you shy away from any of like the horrors of war from a kid's perspective?
No, I don't. I figure if you can read 2,000 pages into an epic historical graphic novel series, you're ready to know that war involves some violence, you know?
Mm.
And horrible things happen. Starting in volume three, unimaginable combat situations happen that I can't imagine. I've drawn them. I've drawn thousands of pages of this, and I still don't know how people survived it, other than that they didn't know either until they were in the situation.
Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 457. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the internationally acclaimed cartoonist and educator, Marek Bennett. Marek, how are you doing?
Hey, Barney.
And you are also a friend of the show. You've been on. You've been on more than 3 times, and you get the moniker friend of the show. And I should have introduced you as friend of the show when I did that. But great to have you back. So Marek, how you been, man?
Okay, yeah, I guess we really haven't sat down and talked comics for It's been 3 years. If it was 2022.
Wow.
Each of these, so in the Freeman Colby series, I hit a milestone. I guess that year I had been working on it 10 years. So this is like a 13-year project. So it's all about like sustainability and the long game. How do you keep doing these books over several years? And so I was finishing up volume 3 then, and it took about 2.5 years to do that. And then I went right into the volume 4 cycle. And I had hoped when we scheduled this a couple months ago, I said, oh, by July, I'll definitely have an advance copy I can mail to Barney, and we'll have the book ready to go, and it'll be great. And here we are in July, and it's like, oh, wait, it feels like just yesterday we scheduled this conversation. So I'm like I think we were saying earlier before you started recording, I'm trying to just focus on like, what can I do each day that I could share with people, and what can I do that I can bring into the classroom and share, because I visit a lot of schools. And then how do I make sure I get a little bit of this book done, most of which is not very public or shareable. Like it's
right.
just not that shareable if you're like, well, I moved a word bubble over a little and it made the whole page more readable, but it's kind of hard to see on screen, you know?
No, so Marek, remind people what your series Freeman Colby is all about.
Yeah, it's called The Civil War Diary of Freeman Colby. I hope my desk doesn't fall over as I pull these books off the shelf here. It's called The Civil War Diary of Freeman Colby. And it is about to be 4 volumes long, the series. And it starts from the diary of a school teacher. Volume 1 is the complete diary of a school teacher who quits his teaching job and joins the Union Army in the middle of the Civil War. And when you read it, all the words come out of that diary, and all the pictures I draw to go with them. And it's been one of those projects that started off as a very simple concept. I will copy the words from this diary into my graphic novel, and I'll draw pictures to go around them. And it's really opened up into, it's like I have a cast of storytellers. It's not just one person's diary, because, I mean, surprise, surprise, one person's diary is by no means sufficient to tell the story of a historical situation. It's one person's view. It's one person's intentions. It's one person's narrative. And so I have a lot of different storytellers now that kind of bounce off each other and encounter each other and pick up the story where one diary or letter like leaves a gap. Somebody else can pick it up and fill it in. And that's why it's now 4 volumes. It's going to run to 6 volumes when I'm done with the series.
Wow. So where's your other sources that you're pulling from then?
Well, it started it started off with just the diary.
Right.
I mean, we probably talked about this in volume 3 because this has been going on through every volume. It's been growing and changing. But volume 1 is the complete diary, which is a fragment. It doesn't tell his whole story. It's like 1862 to the spring of 1863, and it just trails off. And I thought, well, I'll never know what happens to this guy, but at least I'll have this book that tells that 9-month experience that he had at the start of his Civil War service. And that I put out, that came out in 2016. And some descendants of Freeman Colby actually came across this in the bookstore and said,
wow.
That's our great grandfather or great great uncle. And they got in touch with me and they mailed me a whole envelope full of like 80 pages of letters that Freeman Colby had also written home to the family that covered the time period at the end of the diary fragment all the way through to 1865. And I later found out those were in the Historical Society. I just hadn't gotten into them yet. They're in the same place where I found the diary. So then I started volume 2 and I thought, well, I'll just make those letters into a book. And it quickly, like, I figured 80 pages of letters I could like condense down into a book, and then I'd have the diary and then the letters, and it would be a 2-book series, and I'd be done by like 2017. But I quickly realized, like, when they're just selected letters or whatever letters happen to survive, there's a letter from May and there's a letter from July 1863, and there's no letter from June. But he was still in the army in June. Where was he? And so it became kind of a detective project. Like, where was he? What was he doing? What was the experience of the people around him if I don't know exactly what he was doing, or who might have been around him that I could maybe track down and find their accounts. And it became kind of a quilting project of assembling all these accounts to fill in the gaps. And then it got interesting because I realized, he's selecting details and leaving stuff out that I need to have in this story in order to have a sense of what the details he puts in mean. When he describes a battle or when he describes a city, there's a lot he's leaving out that is right there in the scene. And you really realize that. You don't realize that when you read an account of somebody as they're describing a street or a battlefield or an experience. But when you go to draw it, you realize, there's a lot they don't mention in here. Like if I tell you, I hiked through a forest for 10 miles and then I camped all night, and okay, go draw that. Well, you're going to have so many questions, right? What kind of forest? What happened over the course of the night or something like that? Any narrative, when you go to draw it, you realize how many details are missing from it. And how the words are just this stepping stone, and there's so much space between them. And that gap, I just fell into those gaps and started filling them in with other people's accounts.
And so how much creative licensing did you deliberately do?
My goal is 0 creative licensing, because anything that happens in the book has to happen in a primary source. It has to happen in an account where somebody said, this happened. I saw this. I said this. They said this. Everything comes from that. And occasionally starting in the 2nd volume, occasionally I'll add in little comments, or I'll make up a little, somebody might say something or add to or I might compose a conversation out of that. But by volume 3, I stopped doing that, and I started just sticking to I just stuck to the narrative of the sources. But I mix in visual sources. So when I don't have what I need from a text, I'll go to an artist's work. I'll go to paintings or a sketchbook or photographs and find those details and work them in. So my goal is not to take creative license in what happens and the historical details. The creative license I take is I put together sources that maybe were from different but nearby, or same place but different times. I might put them together to give you a more complete sense of what that place and that situation is.
Mm. Was there anything then, Marek, in your research where you looked at it from the graphic novel perspective and say, this is history that I'm reading here, but it's not interesting enough to turn the page? Has there been anything that maybe you didn't add to a story, but they actually subtracted
Yeah.
just because it helped with the flow?
There are some things. There are some things in Volume 4 that I'm editing around. Where if he writes a letter to his brother and he writes a letter to his parents, and he repeats some of the information, I
Mm.
draw that all out. I draw the exact letters, but there's a couple places where I'm going to have to just consolidate, and because
Right.
the reader doesn't necessarily need to get that redundancy. Um, but I find it's a good rule. Another piece of advice for you artists out there. I find it's a good rule if I'm ever drawing something and then I draw it again. Like the nature of comics is we draw images over and over again and they're different each time. If I'm ever drawing something and then I'm drawing it again, and a little instinct goes off like, oh, this is getting to be just work. This isn't interesting. Why am I drawing this again? I have to have a really good reason if I draw it a second time. And if there's no good reason to draw it a second time, it should just be one big panel and just be drawn once.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't there's if I ever feel like it's not interesting, that's because I don't have the right visual angle or I don't have the right connection with other sources or something's missing from the account. Because that's something I've learned from my sketchbooking is no matter where you are, once you take out a sketchbook and start drawing what's in front of you, it becomes inherently interesting. It becomes beautiful on its own terms. In a That's not in a judgmental, fashiony sort of beauty sense, but in a sense of like appreciating and respecting what's in existence in front of you. So you don't have to you don't have to get on a plane and go to the ends of the earth to find a scenic view. All you need to do is pay attention to what's in front of you, and that blade of grass or that empty lot or that bug crawling on the wall, if you pay attention to it, it becomes interesting. That sounds like a really horrible ad for a graphic novel, though. but I really believe that if you dig into, even when he's talking about life in a camp in a fort in the summertime in 1864, it's a pretty wretched place to be camping out with people lobbing shells over your head and terrible smells all around and the constant threat of disease or violent death. And yet, like these people who are serving in the army, people who are serving in the hospitals, civilians who are caught up in in what the storyline is, those that survived left accounts, and those accounts tell us about what it means to be human in those situations. And if I can put my full attention into it and draw it, again, it becomes like beautiful in the sense of I respect the story and I need to see it and I want to see it brought out to readers. So I don't, if I do ever feel like it's uninteresting, that's because I'm not in the right space for it. I don't have the right sources or the right angle. It's good to be aware of that. You have to do comics, you have to constantly like monitor that. And I tell my students that if you're excited about it, your reader will see that through the art and be excited about it with you. And if you're ever tired of drawing, maybe you should stop and go take a walk and come back to it when you're fresh, and think of that's your instinct telling you, hey, there's a better way to do this. Let's find a different way.
Now, so within in the Civil War, we're dealing with like thousands upon thousands of characters.
Yeah.
Did you in your book consolidate specific people into one character?
No, for the most part, there are a few unnamed characters who pop up and sometimes voice texts and concepts from a collection of sources. I have a couple unnamed soldiers in the regiment with Freeman Colby who, one of them, I call him the tough guy, and he's just like, he's this tough looking soldier. And whenever like some voice of experience comes through, oh, you know why they do that? He'll kind of be there in the corner and in the background, and he'll lean in and like be that voice of experience. So I guess in some ways I have, but all the named characters, all the people who are in the story are actual people who left accounts. The creative license, or the fictional part, I guess, is that they didn't all meet in this way. Like in volume 3, I show Freeman Colby. I know from his letters that he walked all around Washington, D.C., and he tried to see as much as he could of the city while he was there. I also know he had in New Hampshire, he's from Henniker, New Hampshire, where I, was born and grew up. And he had a New Hampshire connection. The guy who was the sergeant at arms in the Capitol building was from New Hampshire. And they knew each other somehow. I think they had family members in the same town near here. And so he says in his letter, he went to see Ordway, the sergeant at arms, and he showed me all around. And he doesn't say exactly what he saw, but he says like he gave me the full tour. And that was the very week that the Senate was debating the 13th Amendment. So we'll never know where he was when. Like there's no security camera that's registering that. All we know is he got a full tour of the Capitol building on the week they were debating the 13th Amendment. Did he go and listen to that debate? I don't know, but don't you kind of want to know what that debate was like on that historic day? The 13th Amendment to end slavery in the United States. Maybe he totally missed it, but that I can still bring my readers into the room, because there's a reporter I found who attended all the speeches that week and wrote for a Detroit newspaper accounts of what she noticed. And one of the things she noticed that I try to pick up on the stories that get kind of shed or forgotten out of the mainstream storytelling that you see in, the Ken Burns Civil War or something. Which because it's so short and focused, it's only 8 episodes or only a dozen hours or something. So it has to focus down a lot, but I can spread out a little more. And I found this reporter who saw who's reporting on the speeches. She also mentioned up in the gallery, there was a whole section of segregated seating. And from the Black community there in Washington, D.C., there were people who dressed in their finest, who came in and sat and listened. And when everybody else went home, they were still there in the gallery, listening to every single speech and debate for the 13th Amendment. And so they become my eyes and ears, and I can pick and choose from the congressional record. And what speech do we want to show to represent that? If we only give ourselves 2 or 3 pages, to show that. And so it becomes the creative process is like choosing which sources we're going to include in this account and where to say, okay, this might not be exactly historically accurate in that Freeman Colby might or might not have been in that room at the time. But the historical accuracy is that this happened and somebody made the speech and somebody noticed this about the crowd there. And I'll put all those pieces together, and that's what I'm going to draw. And then I put a little note at the back saying, hey, reader, this is how I assembled that scene, and here are the sources. So you can go. That's what makes it nonfiction, really, is you can go. And if you are interested in the scene that I've drawn, you can go look up those sources and see how I did it and see the snips and glues and joinery that I did to make that scene happen.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. As you say, you're working on volume 4. Has there been any surprises that you've uncovered that you didn't know about earlier about the Civil War?
Yeah. One of the one of the delights about volume 4, two things come to mind. First is, even though, like you say, there's thousands and thousands of people involved, hundreds of thousands, millions of people involved, and probably hundreds of thousands of people who left accounts, right, that we can get to and see and hear in their own voices. But there's only so many places and dates, and all those stories start intertwining and connecting in interesting ways. So one of the surprises I had was when I found in I have my proof copy of volume 4 here. So I'm like flipping through pages as I think about it. In one of Freeman Colby's letters in June, he writes home and he says, "Oh, I got my job back with the quartermaster, so I'm not on the front line. My job is I have to go take an 11-mile wagon train back to the supply depot and get food for these, the 100,000+ Union soldiers who were marching across Virginia at the time." This is in June 64. And the Union supply depot is on a river back towards Washington. It's on a place called Port Royal. And that name sounded familiar. And I went and checked, and Port Royal was the place when we worked on the Turner family stories for Vermont Folklife, and we made the graphic novel from Daisy Turner's storytelling. Her dad, Alec Turner, was born in Port Royal and grew up there and was enslaved there all his life up to the Civil War, when he liberated himself and went and joined up with the Union Army. And he tells a story about guiding the Union Army back to Port Royal and what happened when he guided a Union cavalry unit back to the plantation where he was enslaved. And I just thought, wow, that's too much of a coincidence that these two storytellers I was working with on totally different books have this tie to this place that was crucial to their survival in very different ways. So I worked him into volume 4. That's the creative license I can take. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know where he was exactly in June of 1864, but it's possible he was helping out with the supply train, or someone like him. I know someone like him was helping out with the supply train. So he can stand in, and as they bring those wagons back, he can sit with Freeman Colby. When the day is done, they sit around a campfire and he can tell that story. So I bring him into the story. And that was one of the neatest surprises, to realize that their paths didn't cross at the same day, but they crossed in that place.
Right. And so you mentioned earlier that you're going to put out 6 volumes to this, correct?
Yeah, I cross my fingers when I think that. That's the plan right now.
And
but my initial plan was 1 book, so it could be off by a factor of 6.
So does that mean that you actually have enough material that you've discovered and researched to take you through till the end of the Civil War then?
Yeah. I mean, I could, if I had to, I could maybe finish up just doing Freeman Colby's letters and do a little 50 or 100 page graphic novella and be done with it, but that it wouldn't do the story justice. But it's like with volume 3, out of a 500 page book, 50 pages came from Freeman Colby's letters. The rest are all other storytellers that I added in to make it make sense and flesh out the story. And without that, you wouldn't have a sense of the world where it's happening in 1864. But this one, volume 1 covered 9 months, and it's a shorter book. Volume 2 covered all 12 months of 1863. That was my goal for volume 3, to cover 12 months, but it's only 5 months, and it's even longer than volume 2 because there's so much happening in that spring. And volume 4 is going to be about the same. It's going to be about 450 pages, but it's really only covering 2 months, it turns out. My goal was to cover 4 months, but there's so much to tell in the summer of 1864. And that means to wrap up in 6 volumes, I'm going to have to be really economical to cover the presidential election of 1864, which which I thought I might be drawing around the presidential election of 2024, but it just hasn't happened yet. So I'll keep working on it. So there's a presidential election. There are a number of prison diaries too from fall 1864 that I'm going to work into that one. And that may carry over into volume 6. But then the spring actually of 65 really goes pretty fast, because once things start, once the Confederacy really starts crumbling, it crashes. And the letters really, I mean, they were fighting right up to the end. The 39th was involved in the chase of Lee's army up the Appomattox. But I think by that point, I'll be more economical, because you will have just read 1,500 pages of what they're doing. So I can really hint at, if they march overnight and they chase this army through, this landscape, you've just read 1,000 or more pages of that. So you'll have a sense of what it looks like. So I can get that story down really quickly.
Now, because this is based off of a real events, and it is a young adult, so kids read this. Do you shy away from any of the horrors of war from a kid's perspective?
No, I don't. I figure if you can read 2,000 pages into an epic historical graphic novel series, you're ready to know that war involves some violence, and horrible things happen. Starting in volume 3, unimaginable combat situations happen that I can't imagine. And I've drawn them, I've drawn thousands of pages of this, and I still don't know how people survived it, other than that they didn't know either until they were in the situation. And their accounts, some of their accounts are very graphic and descriptive. Some of their accounts use humor. Some of their accounts are evasive, and really put the graphic elements aside and focus on other things. Some of the accounts were written or shared at the time. Some of them were written a day or two later in a letter. Some of them were written down in a memoir the next year. Some of them were made as speeches to veterans groups 50 years later. And all those accounts, and all through those decades, and some of them were made as speeches to civilian groups 20, 30, 40 years later.
Right. So
you have to take into account who's the audience, what was their intention in creating the text. Like writing a letter to your little sister is different from writing a letter to your brother who's a fellow soldier. And writing it the day after something happens is different from writing it down 50 years later for a reunion. And the use of humor, the use of graphic detail is all different in those accounts. So I kind of, and ideally you actually have multiple accounts of any event or any situation, because if thousands of people are involved, or tens of thousands of people are involved, you can go through different regimental histories and get very different stories about the event. And you quickly realize, oh my gosh, what is the truth about this event? The truth is these thousands of accounts, and the sifting of it, and the putting it together and trying to figure out what's the narrative we need to tell now in 2025 that will help us make sense of 1864, but also of 2025, right? That somehow what speaks to us now is going to be important to our readers. That's what I need to get into the story, even more than what might have spoken to a reader in 1864.
As of this recording, your Kickstarter is launching soon. How can people find this book, say, in the next 5 years? Like, say someone's listening to this or watching this program in 5 years from now. Where can they pick up Freeman Colby Volume 4?
I do them all primarily through my website.
Okay.
I never recommend people go to Amazon, because I've all my life I've either worked in bookstores or used bookstores or supported them. So I publish it through Ingram Spark, so it's available to any bookstore that wants to order them. So best thing is to get, if you have a graphic novel you're interested in that's indie like this, there's no publisher. I'm the publisher. It's self-published. I don't do any distribution or promotion. It's all word of mouth. So if you're interested in these, tell your librarian, point it out to them, send them to the site, and they can get the series info. Tell your bookstore you're interested in it. If you order a copy, they may order an extra copy for the shelves. If it comes from me, if they order it from me, I sign every book. I can sketch into it. If they order it through Ingram Spark, it comes from some giant publishing printing facility in the United States. So,
right. Yeah.
It's always good to order directly from the artist. I don't think I even have PayPal buttons on my site anymore. I just do it through the Patreon. I say, I could put a button out on my site that says $25, $30 for a book or something. But, if you join the Patreon for a year, that's $25 or $30, at the base level. So I might as well send you the book and you get the updates from that. And it's all about, this is going to sound callous, but I'm less interested in selling a book and mailing it to a stranger. I'm more interested in being able to share the process of making the books with people who are interested in the books. And we're not strangers to each other. When you see my process and I see your comments and we get to kind of collaborate on that level in making this book happen, then I think of it as, I'm happy to send a free book to that person who's helping out that way, who's supporting the process,
Right.
And I even have a free books page on my site. It says free books for schools and libraries. If you don't have a budget for books, let me know what you need and I can send it to you. And I can only do that because it's crowdfunded. People support the process and join monthly or annually on the Patreon or the Substack to help me make the books. Because like I said, it takes 3 to 4 years to make each book.
Right.
And the book sales do not support, my lavish lifestyle here. No, they do not support my simple lifestyle, just for 3 or 4 years. So, so it's really those relationships in between the books that we have to develop here.
Yeah. So you can go to marekbennett.com and you've got plenty of links there to talk about some of your comics workshops there. All your books that you've done on there, they can contact you. But as you say, join your Patreon. You have an amazing Patreon page.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, as I'm drawing stuff, I tend to work fast. So, because we didn't really say these books are stick figure comics, for primarily because historically I don't know what a lot of this stuff looked like. I don't know what a lot of these characters look like. So I draw stick figures, and it's very simple. The art is as simple as possible, and then it's faster to edit, so I'm less attached to anything. So I can redraw a page. I can do 3 or 4 drafts on a page. So I'm drawing a lot. I try to draw 1 to 3 pages a day when I'm doing the bulk of the book work, and that'll go on for a year or two. So if I have 1 to 3 pages a day, pretty much every day I post something from the project. And so readers get to see that happening in real time. You see the page, you see the sources and a couple thoughts about it. And there's always new stuff going on. So like we started with, before we started recording, like we were saying, share it, just share what you have. If it's in process, if it doesn't feel complete, put it in front of readers and see how they react to it. And you learn so much about it that way. It's really changed. Doing it that way, it's really changed how I make the books.
All right. Well, listen, Marek, so when you have volume 5 come out, you have to come back on again. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I actually, there was a little problem where I thought volume 4 was running long. It was like 100 pages too long. And then I realized that's not a problem. That's the start to volume 5. So I got a little jump start to volume 5.
All right. Thank you so much, Marek.
Yeah, thank you, Barney. Nice to talk with you.